Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the James MacTaggart Memorial Lecture. I'm Fatima Salaria, Chair of the TV Festival and the TV Foundation. As you all know, this is our last festival in Edinburgh. In 2027, we move to Manchester. There will be proper time to say the goodbyes, but it would be very strange to not stand here tonight and not just acknowledge what this city and the TV festival have meant to each other. It became the place where television came to hold itself to account, where leaders were asked questions they could not answer, and where careers began in queues, in bars, and borrowed rooms. When the TV festival began in 1976, British television was essentially a three-channel world. The industry we are now part of would have been almost unimaginable then. The people working in it have changed. The way the audiences watch has changed. Where power sits has changed. And so the TV festival has to change too. That is part of why we are moving. We want to grow. We want to open ourselves up and reach more of the industry. And the people I keep thinking about are the ones who increasingly feel they can't be part of this room. I'm going to come back to them. But tonight, the question isn't really where the TV festival goes next. It's what kind of industry are we taking with us? When we announced that Pedro Pina, Vice President of YouTube across Europe, the Middle East, and Africa, would give this year's MacTaggart, some people said we had let the fox into the hen house. You can see why. He represents a platform with enormous power over audiences, advertising, creators, and increasingly television itself. It's a good line, but it's also a bit convenient because YouTube didn't do this to us while television sat innocently in the corner. Broadcasters put programs, clips, and talent on platforms. Producers built businesses there. Advertisers followed audiences there. Creators found communities and invented formats traditional television had often missed. And viewers moved between a drama, a podcast, a creator, and a YouTube channel without asking anyone in this room for permission. The boundaries we still argue about are the ones the audience mostly stopped caring about years ago. So before we decide exactly what we think, let's hear what Pedro's got to say. There are real questions here about platform power, revenue, rights, data, and the future of public service media. But YouTube is also part of our world in a way it simply wasn't a few years ago. And the MacTaggart should absolutely be the place where we hear directly from the people shaping this industry. Powerful people come here to make their argument, and the rest of us listen properly, and then we make their lives difficult. Politely, of course, we are obviously still in Edinburgh. But YouTube is only one part of what is happening to our industry. Companies are consolidating, audiences are changing their habits faster than most businesses are changing their models. AI is raising huge questions about copyright, consent, trust, authorship, and jobs. And for all the talk about platforms and deals and technology, there is a much more immediate question for a lot of people in this industry. Who can actually afford to survive this? If you've got savings or contacts, or a family who can carry you through a bad year, you may find a way through, but others won't. And whether you find one has almost nothing to do with talent and almost everything to do with money. There are people who might once have come to the TV festival to talk, to mingle, to pitch an idea, or to simply remind the industry that they are still here. Perhaps their company's now closed. Perhaps a restructure has left them out on the outside. Perhaps they are no longer attached to the hit program of the year, no longer the person everybody wants to see in the room. And then there's that awful question, asked so casually in a corridor or over a drink. So what are you doing now? When you don't have an answer, it can feel less like a question and more like a judgment. I know because I've asked it, cheerfully, in a corridor, already looking over someone's shoulder for the next person and watched it land a second too late. And I've been on the other end of it, working out how to make being a freelancer actually sound like a plan. After a while, some people just stop putting themselves in the way of that question, so they just stay away. Not because they can't afford the hotel, or the pass, or the train, but because somewhere along the way, they've stopped feeling important enough to be here. And this industry, if we're honest with ourselves, is very good at remembering people when they're useful and very quick to forget them when they're not. I don't want this festival to forget them. If anything, they are a big part of why we are changing, to reach more of the people this industry has quietly written off. We want this to be somewhere people can come back into the room once a year, to plug back in, to see people, hear the new ideas, make a connection, laugh, and hopefully leave feeling a little less alone and a little more hopeful about what comes next. That's also why we care so much about the work of the TV Foundation. The network, the visionaries, the new Voice Awards, our bursaries, and our talent programs help people into this industry and stay in it long enough to build something. So when you buy a pass, when you come to a session, you're also helping somebody else get their start. Because if those people leave television altogether, we don't just lose workers or colleagues. We lose their stories, their instinct, their experience, and their point of view. And that changes who gets to make television, and inevitably the television that gets made, which ultimately is what all of this comes back to. What are we actually putting on the screen? There's a lot of talk about AI slop, that horrible phrase for low-quality content generated cheaply and endlessly to fill our feeds. But maybe the real warning is not that AI will make too much bad content. Maybe it's that we start thinking that more content is the answer, because very soon there will be more content than any of us could watch in 1,000 lifetimes. So volume is not the prize, choice is. And everyone in this room knows how much harder those choices get when your budgets are tight and when there's less room to be wrong. So perhaps the challenge for television isn't to join the race for more. It's to hold our nerve about what deserves to be made. And for me, that is what sits behind tonight. Not simply whether YouTube is television, but what television becomes when the question is no longer ours alone to answer. Before we hear from Pedro, I want to welcome this year's advisory chair, Adam Hawkins. Adam is director of documentary series at Netflix UK, and before that he was the US creative director at Raw. So he understands what it takes to make the work, as well as what it means to operate at the scale of a global platform. Over the past year, Adam has brought intelligence, he's brought humor and enormous generosity to the festival, and he's helped us put together a program that asks difficult questions, but still remembers why we all came into this maddening, inventive, and occasionally ridiculous industry in the first place. So please help me welcome Adam Hawkins.
Well, thank you, Fatima. And thank you to Fatima, Campbell, Niall, and everyone at the TV Festival and TV Foundation. The work they do year after year with extraordinary care and ambition makes this industry better. They've been wonderful thought partners throughout the preparation for this festival. They've coached me through my anxieties, and I had many. I should tell you something about myself. I'm a natural pessimist. The glass isn't just half empty. The glass is permanently teetering on the edge of the table. My wife has a name for it. She calls me VOD, Voice of Doom. Of course, the joke when I joined Netflix was perhaps I should go from VOD to SVOD. So, naturally, when I was asked to chair this year's festival, my first instinct was dread. Introducing the MacTaggart Lecture, the most prestigious lecture in British television. Well, no pressure then. But here's the thing. Anxiety is something the whole industry shares right now, and I understand why. The television landscape has shifted profoundly, and the pace of that shift has been disorientating. But I want to be precise about something. This industry isn't being disrupted. It's already been disrupted, and we have to get used to it. So, tonight, I'm going to do something that does not come naturally to me. I'm going to be optimistic. Not despite this disruption, but because of it. More television is being watched and more television is being made than at any other point in human history. And the creative ambition on screen is extraordinary. The cinematic scale of Stranger Things, the cultural shockwaves of adolescence, the compulsive, joyful grip of The Traitors. The quality bar has never been higher. And audiences have never been more engaged, not checked out, not distracted, but genuinely, passionately engaged. But here's the thing I find truly exciting. It's not just that the ceiling has risen, it's that the floor has completely disappeared. The barrier to entry has never been lower. You no longer need an agent, a commission, or even an industry contact to build a television audience. Look at Amelia de Moldenberg, who turned a brilliantly awkward YouTube interview format into one of the most distinctive voices in British media. Look at the Sidemen, a group of friends who built a global entertainment empire from their bedrooms. Homegrown, DIY, enormous, and entirely on their own terms. This is the democratization of television, and it changes everything. Who gets to make it, who gets to watch it, and who gets to matter. Which brings me to tonight's MacTaggart lecturer. It feels right, in fact, it feels almost inevitable that the 2026 James MacTaggart Memorial Lecture is delivered by someone who sits at the very center of this transformation. And let's be clear about something. YouTube is television, not television's scrappy younger cousin, not a distraction from proper TV, television. It's in our screens, it's in our living rooms, and it's watched by millions of people every single day. Just like the BBC, just like Netflix, it is where culture is made, where careers are launched, and where the next generation of storytellers are finding their audience right now, without asking anyone's permission. And leading YouTube across Europe, the Middle East, and Africa is Pedro Pina. Pedro's platform hosts billions of TV shows. He's a passionate champion of independent creators, a fierce advocate for LGBTQ+ representation in the media, and one of the most generous and clear-eyed thinkers working in the industry today. Now, he may be a newer name to some of you in this room, but I have a feeling that's all about to change. I wanted this year's festival to be about what this industry can not just to survive the next decade, but to genuinely thrive in it, to look forward rather than looking backwards, and to be energized rather than being anxious. Pedro Pina is exactly the person to make that case. Sharp, honest, and completely unafraid of where television is going, because, frankly, he's already there. Please welcome to the stage for the 2026 James MacTaggart Memorial Lecture, Pedro Pina.
Good evening, everyone. Before I start, I would like to thank tonight's British Sign Language interpreters, Nathan and Greg. And thank you, Fatima and Adam, for that incredible, warm welcome. And for making me feel so at home with all of you tonight. Ladies and gentlemen, what a profound honor it is to stand before the British television industry almost 20 years after I became a British citizen. Some of you in the audience may be familiar with the Life in the UK test we immigrants have to take. For those who are not, here's a little taster of the things we have to learn about. The British Isles separated from the Eurasian continent 10,000 years ago. King Edward I annexed Wales in 1284 by passing the Statute of Rhiddland. And Sir Mo Farah has won 4 Olympic golds and 6 world titles. Now, no offense to the authors of the Life in the UK test or to Sir Mo Farah, but I'm not sure how useful any of that has been as far as actually living in the UK goes. Life in the UK test teaches nothing about the subtleties of the British sense of humor, about always rooting for the underdog, or what would perhaps be most useful, how to navigate the class system. Well, luckily for me, I'd learned most of those lessons already growing up in Lisbon. Because, ladies and gentlemen, I was raised on British television. I laughed along the satire of Yes, Prime Minister and the surrealism of Monty Python. Sherlock Holmes and the Doctor taught me always to question authority, and for better for worse, from Upstairs, Downstairs, Brideshead Revisited, and Only Fools and Horses, I learned that he who dares wins, but money can't buy class. So believe me when I say what an honor it is to be here tonight. I'm grateful to my husband, Rodrigo, for being in the audience. And even more grateful that our 2 beautiful children are at the hotel right now watching the BBC's Hey Dougie on YouTube Kids with absolutely no interest whatsoever in tuning into Dad's live stream. Because the truth is that when Adam extended this invitation, my immediate reaction was intense psychological dread. Whoever stands on this stage steps into enormous shoes. There are the broadcasters like Louis Theroux, Emily Maitlis, David Olusuga, whose programs have helped to shape the way I see the world. And the leaders like James Harding, Dorothy Byrne, and Shane Smith, whose work has shaped this industry which matters so much to me. Anyone would be nervous. But as a representative of YouTube, I think it's fair to say that I have more reasons to be nervous standing in front of this audience than most. After all, in the context of the many challenges the TV industry currently faces, a story is starting to emerge about online platforms like us. And it goes something like this. British television is under siege. For decades, the UK was a global powerhouse for creative genius and fearless reporting. We led the world in drama, comedy, and news. And then about a decade ago, the foreign tech companies came along and they tempted viewers away from good programming with low-quality clickbait. In the online free-for-all, misinformation thrives. The bottom has fallen out of the British creative economy because millennials and Gen Zs are abandoning television for the siren song of the algorithm, for the labyrinth of endless scrolling. So, enjoy the likes of Panorama, Planet Earth, and It's a Sin while you can, because the days of well-funded, high-quality TV in this country are numbered. At least that is how the story usually goes, like a well-scripted tragedy. We have our once great hero, we have their terrible downfall, and in platforms like YouTube, we have an obvious villain. It's a powerful story. It's an emotive story. The trouble is, it is not true. Television made and aired in the UK still commands enormous audiences. The first series of Gavin and Stacey in 2007 averaged about 500,000 viewers. When Series 3 aired on BBC One, between 6 and 10 million people tuned in every week. Those numbers are good, but they're nothing compared to the finale in 2024, which almost 21 million people watched that Christmas, either live or shortly afterwards on BBC iPlayer. And the population in this country, let me remind you, is 70 million. We are as much of a TV-loving nation as ever. When The Traitors is on, we kick the day off by gossiping about last night's elimination with our colleagues. At least that's what we do at YouTube. When one of the nations qualifies for a major football tournament, the only question to ask is, where are you watching? And after 24 years of injustice, thanks to careful journalism and tireless campaigning, it was Mr. Bates versus the post office that forced the public to pay attention and demand that the powers that be give sub-postmasters the justice they are owed. We are living, ladies and gentlemen, at the height of the video age. On average, in the UK, we now spend over a quarter of our waking hours watching video. Traditional television makes up a huge proportion of that time, alongside premium streaming and, of course, online video. We also know that today's viewers access video across multiple screens. Now, if you simply looked at the history of consumer technology over the last century, you would be forgiven for thinking the preference was for ever smaller screens. From the megaplex to the TV set, then to the laptop, to the tablet, and the smartphone. And I certainly see a lot of people catching up on first dates and Hollyoaks on the Elizabeth line every morning when I go to work. But a few years ago at YouTube, we started to see a shift, which may surprise you. A shift away from smartphones and laptops. A shift back to the living room TV. According to research by Oxford Economics, 87% of our UK viewers watch YouTube on their televisions, and that figure rises to 96% for those aged under 35, the supposed smartphone generation. From where we're standing, people aren't abandoning their televisions at all. They're flocking to them. Now, I do not wish to play down any of the very real concerns I hear across the industry. Viewing habits have changed dramatically, especially, though not exclusively, among other 35s. The majority of video watched in UK homes still comes from broadcasters, but when you focus on 16 to 34s, and that's Gen Zs and millennials, less than a quarter of what they're choosing to watch is traditional broadcaster content. It would be easy to shake our heads and say, they're just scrolling through slop. But I'm here to tell you that that's simply not true. YouTube is by far the most watched platform among young adults, and you can learn a lot about their habits from our viewing figures. You see, unlike major streaming platforms and broadcasters, we do not curate our users' feeds based on our own corporate interests. Our algorithm makes suggestions based on our viewers' interests. Personalized recommendations simply help them to find more of what they enjoy. And the result is not a race to the bottom churn of addictive rubbish. Take Dominic Sandbrook's and Tom Holland's Rest is History series on First World War. Episode 1 pulled in over 900,000 views. 13 million people, meanwhile, watched Matt Armstrong painstakingly restore a wrecked car in his Leicester workshop. By the way, major broadcasters, studios, and streamers also perform very well on YouTube, which doesn't surprise me at all. They produce phenomenal content, which is why we collaborate with so many of them here in the UK and across Europe. Just look at the official channel for ITV Studios' River Monsters, whose audience stays to watch on average for 90 minutes of underwater adventuring. And by the way, River Monsters has a particularly loyal fan base among under 35s, the generation whose attention span has supposedly been destroyed by the internet. So while it is true that traditional broadcast TV no longer has a monopoly on viewers' attention, that does not mean that any form of online video now has the monopoly. It simply means there's no monopoly anymore. And from the viewer's perspective, that is a very good thing indeed. Some of us are old enough to remember what it was like to have only a few channels. Half the time, there was absolutely nothing you wanted to watch. Today's audiences, with their voracious media appetites, have a limitless range of viewing options. Sometimes they come to YouTube, sometimes they go to streaming services, and sometimes to traditional TV. Now, from an industry perspective, of course, this sounds absolutely terrifying. But if we take a long view of human culture, we find no reason to assume that online video will supersede television as a form. Let's imagine for a moment that we are walking through the galleries of the Victoria and Albert Museum where, disclaimer, I'm a proud trustee. A walk around the V&A is a tour through the history of world art and design. From a horse's head carved in jade during China's Han Dynasty to the careful sketches of bells and scales in Leonardo's notebooks, right up to the pictures of Victorian families dressed up in all their finery, shot on daguerreotype cameras. We arrive at last at today's galleries where sculpture, textile, and painting sit beside film, photography, and digital art. The story of art is not one of linear evolution where sculpture gave way to painting, which then gave way to photography. Instead, we see the development of an increasingly diverse creative ecosystem. With the benefit of hindsight, it is clear that none of these new forms was ever an existential threat to any of the others. But if we were to travel back to 1839, we would find an art world up in arms about the invention of those daguerreotype cameras. Up until then, if you wanted to document reality or to capture a likeness, you hired a painter. Painting held an effective monopoly on the still image. So when the art establishment set eyes on the first photographs, widespread dread set in. The French painter Paul Delaroche announced that painting was dead. In 1859, Charles Baudelaire said that if photography was allowed to cross into the sacred territory of fine art, it would corrupt it. The camera was simply a refuge for, quote, failed painters with too little talent. Strong words. But if history teaches anything, it is that we cannot resist the tide. Slowly, but surely, the art world came to embrace photography, which made its ways from pages of newspapers to the walls of great galleries in less than a century. In fact, the camera quickly turned out to be a very useful tool for painters. Even one of its most outspoken critics, Jean-Auguste Dominique-Ingres, was eventually rumbled for using photos as references for composition. Of course, mid-19th century styles of painting did not survive the dawn of photography unscathed, but that is exactly what you would expect from an artistic canon that's always evolving. And if anything, the camera helped to liberate painting from the demand for realism. This set the stage for modern painting, for Klimt, for Van Gogh, for Picasso. Because far from destroying visual art, photography helped it mature as a medium. Now, I hope you forgive me for jumping from Klimt and Baudelaire to Kane and Bellingham. But I suggest that we can see a similar process take place with a moving image today. The Guardian published a great article just last month about how content creators were bringing fans an added dimension to this year's Men's World Cup. As they put it, the world of gathering around the TV set to watch the match on the BBC or ITV still exists, but a new form of football media now thrives alongside it. During the group stage alone, over 25 million people watched World Cup-related content on YouTube in the UK. The BBC's and ITV's YouTube channels showcased top-quality montages and highlights and offered fans virtual tours of the training grounds led by the players themselves. They also co-hosted YouTube watch-alongs like the BBC's with the Sidemen, which meant that viewers could follow the match with live commentary from the Sidemen along with hundreds and thousands of other fans. But it wasn't just the established players who seized this opportunity. If you headed over to an independent YouTube channel, you could choose to watch London-based Algeria fan Lies Bouzidi explaining African teams' performance in granular detail, or join Manchester-based independent commentator Niamh Patriciello from inside the crowd of the England-Ghana game. Lies said this to The Guardian: "I'm not arrogant enough to think, no matter how many viewers I conjure up, that I can ever compete with historic powerhouses like the BBC and ITV." He was right. Online video can be a place to get excited before the match or to analyze a particular tackle or a referee decision. In fact, if you look at the time people in the UK spent watching World Cup-related content on YouTube during this year's knockout stages, you see that 80% of it happened outside the live match window. That's before or after the match itself. We call that the game around the game. Online sports commentary doesn't replace TV coverage. They exist side by side. As Lias says, the broadcasters exist in their own space, and I exist in my own. This is what a healthy media ecosystem looks like. Complementary forms, playing different roles, and pushing each other forward. Of course, if TV carries on the same way it always has, it'll be left behind, but there's nothing new about that. You don't have to go too far back into the archives to find outdated formats. Music videos, for example, were a mainstay of British broadcasting 20 years ago. Today, when you want to watch one, you just go straight to YouTube. That shift didn't kill TV. TV just moved on to different things. As Deborah Turner said in her Sir David Nicholas Memorial Lecture this year, in TV, necessity is the mother of invention. Well, necessity is knocking at the industry's door again. Let's not sugarcoat it. Things will have to change because the playing field TV once dominated has changed. And the steady revenue streams and booming budgets that were built upon the central position TV once held cannot be relied upon. Adjusting to this new environment will not be painless. TV jobs are changing, and new skills are now necessary. But if the fear is that the proliferation of creators and platforms will destroy British TV as such, then the history of this medium proves the very opposite is true. When television sets entered American homes back in the 50s, Hollywood saw them as the enemy. But pretty soon, they realized that they were sitting on a gold mine, a wealth of resources and talent they could channel towards this new form. And the more revenue the studios could pull in from TV shows, the more money they would have to produce the big budget films they really valued. Those conditions produced the first golden age of television. And something very similar happened with the arrival of cable and satellite in the 80s and 90s. Suddenly, there were thousands of new channels competing for attention. The fear was that the audience fragmentation would drive down quality. Sounds familiar? In reality, more competition meant more appetite for risk and more space for new voices. And thus we got the second golden age of television, which gave us The Sopranos, The Wire, Breaking Bad. Closer to home, the expansion of Channel 4 after 1990 set the stage for independently produced British classics, like Queer as Folk, which showed me, as a young man, a world in which I could belong. Today, I believe we are on the cusp of a third golden age of television. Just look at the amazing British TV the so-called streaming revolution has already given us. Shows like Baby Reindeer, Rivals, Chernobyl, and my favorite, Slow Horses, which are which are every bit as good as Motherland, Line of Duty, and Dairy Girls. If you think about it, certain conditions set the stage for both the first two golden ages in the US. rising audience demand, combined with this disruptive new technology and a wealth of creative talent. Ladies and gentlemen, these are exactly the circumstances we find ourselves in today. And unlike those first two golden ages, this time, the UK can lead the way. We are sitting on a gold mine of homegrown creator talent. More than 70,000 UK YouTube channels have over 100,000 subscribers. More than 2,000 have audiences in the millions. Perhaps more strikingly, over 80% of the UK content is viewed outside of the UK. In other words, British global reputation as a creative powerhouse is alive and it's kicking. So if the TV industry can adapt once again to changing audience habits and today's media landscape, a new golden age is the UK's for the taking. So what does adapting to today's media landscape look like? Before anybody panics, don't worry, I'm not going to tell you that you all need to retrain as YouTubers. In fact, I want to start by telling you the opposite. Focus on the things TV does best. And again, this is an argument with history on its side. You see, it's no historical coincidence that the Impressionist movement sprang up in the decades immediately following the invention of the camera. The most strident tech enthusiasts of that time declared painting obsolete. Visual arts' raison d'être, they assumed, was to document reality, and there was this machine that could do that perfectly and instantly. But of course, artists didn't all decide to hang up their smocks and retrain as photographers. Instead, the camera prompted them to ask an interesting question. What's special about painting? Claude Monet, Auguste Renoir, and their contemporaries supplied an answer. I can capture the way the light looked from where I was standing at a particular moment. I can paint pictures which show the viewer what it felt like to be there. The same thing recurs throughout the history of art and design. The arrival of new forms helps to clarify what existing forms can do. In their 1998 book of Understanding New Media, Jay Bolter and Richard Grusin call this remediation. Remediation is a process of mutual influence in which new media borrows from traditional media, and traditional media has to reinvent itself in response. Again, you can look at cinema. Cinemas used to show newsreels, sporting events, government announcements, and light entertainment. I'm sure everyone here knows where the phrase B-movie comes from. Low quality, rush productions churn out to basically fill up screen time. The arrival of home television sets killed the B-movie, but that enabled film studios to focus on what they were best at: high-budget, ambitious, spectacular productions. Over the past 20 years, video sharing platforms have done something very similar for TV. And the question now is, what is television best at? When we look at the best performing programs, three clear answers emerge. First, broadcast TV sparks national conversations because it has an unmatched power to bring the country together in real time. Think of the rituals around The Traitors, The Great British Bake Off, or Strictly, or the build-up to the season finales of Broadchurch or Line of Duty. Viewers take to online platforms to keep the conversation going, but in each case, the TV broadcast is the vital spark. Second, broadcasters and premium subscription services have unmatched institutional heft. They can access financing arrangements which make big-budget dramas like The Night Manager and The Crown possible. And they can marshal the editorial and production resources that are required for lengthy investigations like Dispatches and spectacular documentaries like Our Planet. Which leads me to the third, slightly counterintuitive strength. I often talk about how online platforms free creators from scheduling constraints like arbitrary limits on series length or episode runtime. That's what makes YouTube such a powerful engine of new formats. But when I think about the British TV shows I love the most, from tightly plotted dramas like Industry to clever comedies like Fleabag, I gotta admit that the constraints of traditional broadcasting have their upsides. They encourage sharp writing and economical storytelling. Now, like many industries before it, from newspapers to aviation, TV is finding it has to reinvent its business model. But adapting to a new commercial environment does not mean forgetting who you are. And let's remember, necessity is the mother of invention. How ironic that during a time when so many say British TV is dying, we have seen some of the best British TV shows of all time. Shows which create cultural conversations on a scale most online creators can only dream of. And this is not to say that TV has nothing to learn from online video platforms. But the smartest producers understand that learning from doesn't have to mean emulating. To make great TV, you have to meet your audience where they are. And I don't mean giving the people what they want in a lazy, formulaic sense. I mean understanding deeply what moves and what motivates people. In a sense, YouTube is one big study into viewer preferences. Every second of watch time tells us something about what people care about. And the channels which end up with huge followings sometimes surprise us. Just look at Alex Steele, the Norwich-based blacksmith, whose 3 million subscribers watch him forge hammers and axes. Compared with traditional broadcasting, channels like those tend to have one thing in common: the direct and authentic way that they connect with their audiences. Media critics sometimes talk about the new affinity economy, where the bond between the creator and audience is a central part of the entertainment experience. Alex Steele's subscribers might not all be blacksmithing enthusiasts per se, but they all respond to Alex's passion and the way he shares it with them. I don't think that this desire for affinity began with YouTube. The algorithm didn't create that preference. It simply revealed it. So while I don't think broadcasters and production companies should try to emulate online platforms, I do think they can use this insight to their advantage. After all, politicians are using it. Just look at the recent video of the Prime Minister and his Chancellor in the pub. It was 2 fun videos of 2 blokes discussing crisps and scampi fries. But it had a serious message too, announcing a cut to pubs' business rates. The most innovative TV makers today do something very similar. They embrace direct-to-camera, personality-driven content and a more informal and colloquial style of communication, while preserving what is special and unique about television. I saw a brilliant example just last month on YouTube from BBC News, which is still the country's most used and most trusted news source. Chris Mason was in Ankara covering NATO when Nigel Farage resigned. And a couple of days later, BBC News released a 6-minute mini documentary about Mason's experience, where he took us behind the scenes from the plane to this hotel room, and he told us what it was like to try to juggle both stories at once, to then analyze what it might tell us about the state of modern politics. Content like this is not the expense of factual news. It's complementary. In an era where viewers can access headlines instantly, anywhere, on their smartphones, from experts like Chris Mason, they want something more. They want real analysis. And that's why I think production models like Goalhanger make so much sense. Audiences can learn about black holes and fluid dynamics with Professor Hannah Fry, or deep dive into Icelandic politics with Alistair Campbell and Rory Stewart, safe in the knowledge that their guides have charisma and credentials. At a time when budgets are tight, I think this is a great lesson in selective spending. Invest in what your audience values, the talent. It's also time we got over the old assumption that the new ways of consuming media are necessarily worse. I'm willing to bet that even YouTube's fiercest critics, none of them are in this room, of course, still use our platform to find and watch videos they deem valuable, just like those painters in the 1850s who used the dreaded camera in secret. And if you think of online video as the domain of teenagers on webcams, you are 15 years out of date. Platforms like ours are incredible developers of creative talent, not only because we are a way for talented people to reach new audiences, but because we enable creators to translate those audiences into income. We share more than half of our advertising revenue with creators. I'll repeat that. YouTube shares video by video more than half of advertising revenue with creators. In an era where further education means debt, and when entry-level entertainment roles are hard to come by, platforms like ours are a rare place where young creatives can earn a stable living. We are proud to say that YouTube supports more than 45,000 full-time equivalent UK jobs. And you might not be surprised to hear that we contribute over 2.2 billion to the UK GDP. For the most part, the creator ecosystem used to sit in parallel to traditional media, but about a decade ago, TV producers spotted an opportunity. They saw that YouTube was effectively a database of up-and-coming talent. And lo and behold, TV started to poach big creators and shows. Nella Rose and Amelia de Molenberg became prime-time TV regulars. Last year, George Clark was on Strictly, and Angry Ginge won I'm a Celeb. And the directors of this year's hit films, Backrooms and Obsession, both got their starts on YouTube. To succeed online, you don't have to have a parent who's friends with a casting agent to get your foot in the door. You don't have to go to Oxbridge or to RADA or to live inside the M25. To succeed online, you just have to be good. You just have to make things people like. That is why YouTube has launched the careers of so many young British stars over the past 20 years. Now, here's a staggering stat. In the UK, 75% of creators who say they have a media and entertainment career started that career on YouTube. We are genuinely a meritocratic incubator of talent. You know, online platforms get a lot of shtick for tempting away TV's top talents like Gary Lineker and Piers Morgan, but I say it's only fair considering how much more traffic moves in the opposite direction. And I'm joking really when I say that TV poaches YouTube's talent, because online video platforms and broadcasters are not in competition. Remember I talked earlier about Gavin and Stacey's impressive ratings? Well, a clip entitled Smithy's Indian Takeaway has 3.3 million views on the BBC Studios YouTube channel. The same clip on the BBC's main channel has 2.2 million views and another 420,000 more views over on the BritBox channel. Combined, that's about as many views as the original episode pulled in 17 years ago. Were those millions of people watching YouTube when they watched that video, or the BBC? The answer, obviously, is that they were watching both. There's a reason the BBC's response to the government's Charter Review Green Paper highlights its YouTube channel subscriber count, as well as the corporation's ambitious plans to keep growing on our platform. They recognize that our interests are not in contradiction. I think our landmark partnership demonstrates YouTube's commitment to the health of British broadcasting. At the moment, the BBC chooses not to run adverts on most of its YouTube content for UK consumption, and if they do not make money from one of their videos, neither do we. But we still love having BBC-made content on our platform, and we want more of it. After all, people come to YouTube because they trust they'll be able to find the content they love there. Content that will inform, educate, and entertain them. By definition, that has to include their favorite mainstream media channels, like the BBC. At a time when the BBC's funding model is being debated, every UK view its channels attract helps to cement its status as the nation's primary public media organization. And for every view they choose to monetize, we send more than half of the advertising revenue straight back to the BBC. As of this month, BBC News live streams its main feed on YouTube in Australia, Poland, Nigeria, and Kenya 24 hours a day, with plans to test further markets soon. We worked closely with the BBC to enable their advertising model for the stream, so it can capture the commercial value of its global reputation while protecting the principles that make the BBC the BBC: impartiality, independence, and integrity. Partnerships like this really are the way forward for UK television. They represent a commercial opportunity for producers and broadcasters and a significant boost to national soft power. And we believe it's important to protect the UK's world-famous cultural exports. Now, as you'll be aware, that is also a key motivation behind the government's media green paper. And we welcome this important debate about the future of media. But, as part of it, some in the industry are proposing forced prominence for public service media, which could put future partnerships in jeopardy. I share the concerns expressed about democracy and the public interests. But YouTube is a democracy by definition, a democracy of cultural production. Anyone can find an audience. Forced prominence would impair the public interest by unfairly shifting focus from independent creators and production companies, and by recommending that all our viewers watch the same things, disregarding personal taste. If this becomes law, many UK-based creators and production companies will see their livelihoods threatened. UK viewers will have to wade through content they may not want, which in itself could undermine the trust that UK public service broadcasters have built up. YouTube is a platform that exists to host a plurality of views, from institutional to independent, and for years, we have been investing in supporting and promoting high-quality journalism. Our systems already identify credible news sources and make it easier for people to find them. If you open the YouTube app right now and search for any big news story, you are likely to see the BBC, The Times, Channel 4 News, The Guardian, The Telegraph, almost immediately, if they've uploaded a video on that story. The UK press and broadcasters rack up huge numbers of views on YouTube. And a new wave of independent news sources like TLDR and Politics Joe have built big audiences too. To me, that diversity proves that what we're doing works. Forced prominence won't help anyone succeed. Not new independent talent, not viewers, and definitely not public service media. Instead, it will have the unintended consequence of jeopardizing the new talent pipeline by undermining the creator economy, which contributes so much to UK's soft power. We should all be making it easier, not harder, to build a creative career online. Remember what I said before, in the UK, 75% of creators who say they have a media and entertainment career started a career on YouTube. And the launch of the Creative Industry Sector Plan last year was a welcome development. We hope it will offer real support for British creators in the form of increased access to finance and skills training, and that it won't be undermined by bad legislation. I care about the survival of public service media. I want my children to grow up with brilliant British television, just like I did. But the way to achieve prominence on a platform like YouTube is to make good quality content people want to watch. And in order to do that, one needs to understand that today's media landscape reflects one simple fact. Different viewers want to watch different things at different times. That much is obvious when we look at the audiences on our platform. You might be pressing play on videos about film theory or fashion predictions. You might be interested in Minecraft. You, Arsenal Football Club. You may decide to learn Speak with Alexa Polidoro, if that's your jam. And you, over there, might want to lose yourself in Bad Bunny live performance. No? Okay, that's on me then. You see, there's a reason we call it YouTube. It's about you and you and you, each one of you. The more freedom viewers have to find what they want, when they want it, the more opportunities for creators, streamers, and broadcasters to learn what makes their viewers tick. As a result, they create better content. One of the things I love the most about my job is that I get to hang out with athletes and explorers and teachers and makeup artists and lifestyle gurus and drummers and knitters and seamstresses. I could go on and on. But you know what they have in common? They've all taken up side hustles as data scientists. Once the camera is off, they use YouTube's tools to review their audience retention graphs, second by second, video by video. Combined with comments and suggestions from fans, they can then experiment with new formats, new scripts, and new backgrounds. This is what meeting your audience where they are looks like. And mainstream broadcasters can benefit from YouTube's analytics tools in the same way that independent creators can. In fact, many of them are already doing just that. Channel 4 is achieving significant viewership uplifts by putting full episodes of classic shows like Grand Designs and Gogglebox on YouTube. But it is brand new content on their digital-first platform 4.0 which regularly amasses views in the hundreds of thousands or even millions. That's thanks to 4.0's brilliant digital native stars like Chunks and Specs Gonzalez, but also to its very agile approach to commissioning and production. In traditional broadcasting, you make the show first, usually in its entirety, and then analyze ratings later. This requires big upfront investments and therefore risk aversion. But on YouTube, you can take risks. You can watch how your audience responds, and you can change tack quickly. This is really great news for TV budgets. It means fewer expensive guesses and greater audience insight. And more importantly, it is great for television as an art form. It means more shows, more creativity, and more space for new British voices. When I look at the UK television industry 2026, I see countless more brilliant examples of digital-first initiatives. I see broadcasters reaching new audiences on YouTube with channels like BBC Deep Watch, A Comedy Thing, and Saturday Night Live UK. I see forward-thinking investments like Sisters Pictures' acquisition of After Party Studios. And I see YouTube playing our part too by deepening our commitment to this great industry. Just this week, we were pleased to announce that YouTube will invest £3 million over the next 3 years to support new talent into the industry and, importantly, to reskill mid-career professionals. We will expand our partnership with the National Film and Television School, like the YouTube-sponsored Creator Incubator, and student capacity on this course will now increase tenfold. A story is unfolding before our eyes, and it's not a tragedy. And as I hope I have shown you tonight, YouTube is not the villain. The thing about a tragedy, as Aristotle taught us, is that the tragic hero is responsible for his own downfall. It is never an even villain that seals the hero's fate. It is hubris. It's pride. For this country's great television institutions, changing audience habits are an opportunity, not a threat. The question now is whether we will seize that opportunity. Every broadcaster, every subscription service, and every producer has a choice to make now. Keep doing the things the way you've always done them in the hope that regulation will shield you from change, or embrace today's media landscape. Meet the audience where they are, discover new talent, open up new revenue streams, and you will retain your place at the center of life in the UK. Ladies and gentlemen, in 2026, we are seeing more and more of the television greats choose to take the latter path. And YouTube is ready to take this journey alongside you. The stage is set to enter a new golden age of television. Bigger audiences than ever, access to more talent than ever, more possible forms and genres than ever. The next chapter of British television will not be a tragedy. It will be an epic. Thank you. Bloody hell. Thank you.